Does anybody feel like they would like to start our lesson today with some prayer? Don't everybody jump up.
Henry was really wanting to. I saw him jump the gun.
Yeah, he's the volunteer today, so go ahead, Henry. Thank you.
Dear Heavenly Father, we just thank you for today, Lord, and we thank you for your many blessings. And thank you for this time that you've given us to get together with our brothers and sisters in the Lord. And Lord, just bless us all and keep us safe. And Lord, give us remembrance on all the things that we learned today. Thank you, and we praise you and give you all the glory. In Jesus' name, amen.
I really appreciate everybody checking in that's going to be here online, but especially for coming in person, because I think we received so much more together than, if we're just doing it on Zoom. I know it's a convenient thing if you've got a lot going on. The one person injured herself, and so she was planning on being here, but now she's doing the Zoom. So, that's what it's convenient for. We can reach a farther, a larger spectrum, farther away people. So we're going to start off as I'll explain from this book, Helping Those in Grief by H. Norman Wright. That's what I'm taking these cases from, and I'll repeat the reason that I thought it was a good idea to actually bring a group together and do some of the cases, and we're going to actually act out a dialogue, because reading the cases and things, I was like overwhelmed. What the heck? I don't know what to do. I don't know what to say. And so I thought, well, if I'm like that, other people would probably be like that just by reading. And it was beneficial. We got a lot of positive response from different people, if you see on the Facebook, to the content of the class, and it's been helpful. I personally have been able to implement it in my conversations with people and in my personal life. As I said on the very, very first class, the Holy Spirit brings scripture to our mind in the time when we need it, but only if we've read the scripture, right? Mm-hmm. If we don't read the scripture, it's not likely, from a word, he can tell you that, but he can't bring it up for you. And the same thing with some of these dialogues and wording, that how do we say different things in a more beneficial way, more productive way when we're dealing with people. And so in that same vein, the Spirit of God, as Christian chaplains, can bring some of these things back to our remembrance. When we practice wording and situations, the Lord can help us to remember a lot better. So we're going to read these dialogue, this case number 5 out loud, and then I'm going to ask you if you have any comments, and then we're going to answer the questions, and then go ahead and see what the author actually said. Now, these are actual situations. The dialogues of the counselor and the counselee is an actual dialogue from a situation. These cases are all actual situations that the author has experienced in his ministry and practice, okay? So in the initial session, a 30-year-old woman shares that her husband was killed in a truck accident 5 years ago after they had been married for only 14 months. Together, they had 2 young children. The man she has been with for the 5 years since her husband's death died 2 months ago as a suicide. She had come home with one of her children, and they found that he had hanged himself. She has 2 children by him. So now she has 4 children under the age of 7 to raise. Okay, what are your first impressions here?
Oh my gosh.
Right.
That is a lot.
That is a lot.
Yeah. Well, in the last 5 years, she lost 2 spouses. And also, like, just I mean, there's the emotional component of that, but even just like, you think financial, you know, all those sorts of things too, because now you're a single parent, you know, home, so like you're the only person to provide as well. So there's like the emotional, physical, and the mental component of yeah, I mean, of that.
I think initially, she's got to feel like this is impossible.
How can this happen to me twice?
Yeah.
Well, that, but the circumstances that she's left with, right?
Right.
She's got to be, I don't even think, how can you think past what's in front of you? Like, how am I going to take care of these children? I don't, you know, I'm by myself now and I have these 4 children. She's got to be a serious feeling of being overwhelmed.
So I think we're all feeling like a compassion for this, it's not an impossible situation, but this daunting situation that this lady is facing. So that's why, you know, we're going through these things, because people need to hear what we're doing here. You want to take the papers out in the hallway?
One of each paper.
Oh, there's one, yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you're gonna need them.
She's like, what
Like,
I
like, just take yourself out in the crowd.
You can just sit.
You're like,
All right. So the day that I bring less snacks, there's a couple more people than I was planning, right? Surprise, surprise. That's okay. We're not here to eat. That's just kind of to help us out, right? Okay. So let's describe the type of grief you may encounter in this case. We're going over case number 5. Anywhere you want. I don't have a certificate for you.
Okay, that's okay.
Okay, I'll get that in the mail. All right? All right, so describe the type of grief you may encounter in this case.
I don't understand what you mean, type of grief. Is
Okay.
that, are there lists of
Like
grief?
depression? Is that something you want?
Well, I'm not looking at the analysis, so.
Right.
She didn't read the questions.
I didn't read the question. So, all right, the type of grief. All right, so first of all, she has lost a husband.
Right.
Okay.
So
So she's
marital.
mourning. A marital.
An adult grief.
Okay.
And then 2 suicides.
Well, one is a truck
The
accident.
one's
Oh.
the truck accident and the.
But the
that-
man had she been with the first husband's death died 2 months ago as a suicide.
Right,
Yeah,
that's
that's
the
the
current
second
one.
That's-
The
That's
first
the second
husband had a
First
truck
one.
accident.
Truck accident.
So those are 2 traumatic deaths. So you know that from
Sudden.
the sudden, the NASH,
Right.
the progression of strength is natural, accident, suicide, homicide. Okay? All right, so I guess we'll have to see what the author thinks about what we mean types of grief. So she's lost her husband, a partner, a lover, a spouse, a financial contributor. We don't know if she was the first, if he was the primary or the only income. Also, the other head of the household for the 4 children. So we don't know what his relationship was with the stepchildren, but being that they're 7 and under, the 2 first children are not going to remember their father. So all those children have lost a parent. Okay?
Well, I'm sure it's been 2 months, so there's gotta be some anger, you know, there's stages of
Right.
the grieving
Grief,
process,
yeah.
you know?
Denial, anger.
I imagine after 2 months, I don't know if anger sets in that amount of time, I imagine it would.
It possibly, I guess we answered, when looking at the second question, we said identify the various losses that have occurred in this woman's life. We already talked about that right now. Often anger can be right at the very beginning. There's a lot of these things are popcorn, right? Okay.
Depression.
So could be a depression.
Could be.
Could be. She could be overwhelmed. We know that when we're dealing with these different things, often in the very initial stages, you need somebody to walk through these things with you, so,
I also think that at this point, with everything that she's gone through, some people react in just abandoning everything, ignoring what the children's needs are and what anybody else's needs are, and just total abandonment of everything around her but her
Shut
own
down.
pain.
Shutting down.
Yeah,
so
shutting
sometimes
down.
people shut down, okay? So number 3, Julie, do you have any input? I guess not.
So what we have for number 2, income?
Okay, she
Income
definitely
loss.
has lost some income, right?
Yeah.
She's
Oh, I'm
lost.
sorry.
somebody-
I was on mute.
You were on mute?
I was on mute. Sorry, I thought I was on mute. I don't know. That's a very tough situation, and I've had a student like that, and that parent almost gave up on all her kids. She almost was like, you talk about abandonment, and she was ready to give up her kids to the state.
Wow.
So, you're dealing with that. When you say that, I was like, I know that happened.
Right, so.
Yeah.
She would need a caregiver, someone to help her care for
Yes.
the children, to give her handyman type of person, perhaps. I mean, my husband cuts the lawn, so, I don't really have to think about that, but.
I mean, I kind of said like support, right? Because you're looking, I mean, that's kind of overall encompassing, whether it's emotional support, whether it's, somebody to get advice from, whether it's like actual, shared responsibilities that are things that now I have to do it all my own. And then we talk about the financial support, and with that, like depending, and I don't mean to sound like materialistic, but there is that component as well. And thinking about like, if that person was one that had the benefits, for example, like what if like her job didn't have the benefits? So there's different things like that. Obviously, we don't know, it's not told, but that would be a loss as well.
Yeah.
So then,
Funeral costs are all that.
Yeah.
right, which, that's all that to recuperate. So along with number 3, then other than grief counseling, she might need some help to navigate social services, number 1, because being minors, those children would be entitled to some social security
Right,
help.
you go through all that.
And they perhaps, depending on what type of income, could get some state
Right, to help her,
insurance, health insurance.
help her to go through that path.
Okay, it doesn't say if he had any insurance, but in order to get benefits from an insurance policy, a suicide has to be after 2 years, usually. So, does she have a house payment? What kind of living situation does she have? Okay, so we already are talking about number 4 somewhat. It's kind of a jumble, but that's okay. These are just guidelines for different things we need to consider. Yes?
Well, and just going back to 3, like the support system, that's something, helping structure like, friends, families and things like that. There might not be counseling per se, but that support system, to help them figure different things out as well. Step in.
Yeah, relatives
Go right to the
bringing
phone
in
book.
food, maybe all your people outside the box doing that for her, so she doesn't have to think about it.
Right, so she might also need some help navigating with she has former in-laws from her first husband, and she has in-law family from her more recent husband to deal with too, to see how there's kind of can be an awkwardness navigating that. So what resources, number 5, would you recommend to her, and how should they be used?
Wait, are you before or are you on 5? I think you're before.
Well, all right, we didn't talk about the symptoms, sorry. We did talk some about the trauma symptoms. All right, we talked about the trauma, but not specifically symptoms, sorry. Let's go back to 4. Good thing you guys are keeping me on track, right? Describe the possible trauma symptoms she may be experiencing.
Depression.
Any kind of drug or alcohol abuse. would be.
To
probably
kind of
way
numb
up there.
things. And so if there's a tendency to that, she could be self-medicating to numb the pain.
Well, also even just that like fight or flight, kind of experience where, that continual, you gotta think that brings a lot of adrenaline on, right? So that continual source of like anxiety and things like that, because trauma symptoms are typically like a lot of that, sweating, the nervousness, the not being able to think, like the cloudy thinking.
Shock.
Mhm.
Right, which we did talk about that in the second session. We did consider I think it was the second section where the little girl, or maybe that was the first one, where the little girl had to call 911.
Right, yeah.
No, I
Yeah.
wasn't there for that one.
Which we talked about the physical aspect of the trauma and shock, that your heart races, your brain gets cloudy, you can't judge things, they're not in correct perception, a couple of things like that. So there are,
I think also for the trauma symptoms, she might become abusive to the children, just taking out her grief and her anger and all the things that she's going through on her children. It might either be neglective abuse or mental abuse or even physical abuse. That happens.
right, so if you guys could speak up a little bit, because I think with this here instead of in the back, it might not, the recording might not pick up and the people online might not pick up so good. Okay, so we talked a little bit, all right, about all these things up to number 4. Last time we just spent a lot of time on the first case, and I'm just trying to be a good judge of time so that we're not running out of time at the end, because everything up to the very end we can benefit from. Okay, so what resources would you recommend for her and how should they be used?
Children qualify for Social Security,
Right,
so probably need to address that. Some kind of state aid for health, to cover their health needs.
For the counselors in their schools.
Counselors.
What about reaching out to our
Reaching out
church?
to the church.
right. If there's a church, they might,
Yeah, that's a good one, because the children would probably need counseling as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
right, an opportunity, even if it's not therapy, being able to express yourself, I think that's a very important part of when we experience any kind of shock or trauma or crisis, that we need to process that so that we don't become traumatized, because the same event doesn't necessitate that all the people in that tragedy are going to be traumatized, but they're all experiencing trauma, right? So one of the things it says, I just remembered, she had come home with one of her children and together they found the father. Okay, it doesn't say if it was an older one or a younger one, but there is that mental image that child needs
Oh
to
my gosh.
de-escalate.
Terrible.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is made up, or is this
No,
real?
these are real. These are all
You
real.
can't make this up, that's really crazy.
Well, that's,
I would say support group for her and for her whole family together.
right.
But she needs it alone so she can really get out those things, those ugly things that she doesn't want her kids to be hearing. But together as a family, and
Yeah.
maybe even the kids individually as well.
Both, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, because, I think having them talk about it, right, I think that is therapy, right? That is
Right, and
what
one of
you're
the things
saying.
what you're trying to do, and we have, one of the handouts talks about the different kinds of grievers, and these things don't necessarily just apply to death. We have grief and all types of things, but there's people, it talks about intuitive grievers, and we've got here for an instrumental griever, and you can read that on your own at home, so how to help different people, how they express and process things. So the whole idea to de-escalate is to remove the emotion from the event so that they can face it and
Yeah.
process it and reduce the brain and emotional effect on it, so that it's not an emotional situation that they're seeing, some people see, but where they can not experience the vividness of the event when they're, just as when it happened, right? Because when we look back at different terrible things that have happened to us and around us, it should be because we've gone through them, that we don't experience the same horror, the same symptoms that we experienced at that same time. And we all know that there's all these different kind of stressors, that can add to the effect, right? If a child moves into a new school district and then something happens, there's more stress on them than if they were in the secure environment
Secure
Right.
environment.
in the secure environment that they were comfortable and familiar with, okay? So we do need to consider what kind of childcare, things around the home, whether it's an apartment or a condo or an actual house, there's needs there, the insurances, any kind of treatment that they need, helping to walk through some of these things. Since they're under the age of 7, it's probable that the oldest one is in school of some type,
Right.
so, and possibly the second child too.
Yeah, I was thinking like just how you said, depending on where they live, is being the fact that you have all this going on, that she's not gonna have a lot of time because you're gonna be planning the funeral, you're gonna be, trying to arrange childcare, you're gonna be trying to do all these different things.
Just living.
Yeah, just living. And you're not gonna have much time for the day-to-day things. And think about how busy we are on just the normal day-to-day things,
Yeah.
let alone having to do with all those things. And so, even coming up with things like finding people that can maybe help clean your house, like do the laundry, set up like with the shopping systems that can be easily like either just pick up, because I always hear this from parents. I love the shopping system that you can just pull up or they deliver it to your house, but I don't have to take all my kids into the store. And people talk about how like overwhelming that is, so on top of everything else.
Yeah.
So
I prefer to stay home.
yeah. Right.
Yeah,
So
I remember those days.
so like setting up, either walking her through those things or putting some of those things into place even for a temporary time, right? It doesn't have to be like a permanent thing, but just a temporary thing. And then also, we kind of talked about counseling, and I think Cindy kind of hit it before too, but setting up a support system or support groups, because support groups are a little bit different than counseling. And then going into counseling, I think that it would probably be beneficial to have individual counseling and then also like family counseling as well. Just, that combo. And then I think it's important too to give resources on coping strategies. Again, going back to a holistic point of view of a person, there's a lot of coping strategies that can be implemented. And, it can be easy stuff. It doesn't have to be, okay, read this big book of yada, yada, yada. Like, there's a lot of techniques and things like that. So giving them resources, simple things that they can just do when they're feeling overwhelmed and things like that. And then even maybe I was thinking like if there was a resource that kind of, or I guess we would kind of do that resource, but that system that she could kind of follow when she is feeling overwhelmed or the kid is feeling overwhelmed or maybe there's an outburst of anger or something like that, like who can they call? And kind of help her set that up. Because a lot of times that happens and I don't know who to go to. I don't know, I don't even know how to think right now. What do I do? And if it's kind of almost like written out like an emergency plan almost for that, I feel like that could be helpful as well.
Yeah, you kind of touched on what I was thinking, because everybody deals with it differently. And, okay, she might be handling it well, but the children might not be.
Right.
And then she has to try and deal with how the children are acting out, and she may not know how to do that.
Right.
Right.
And if it's both,
Oh, yeah, it's a mess, right, it's really bad.
and also where she lives, like if she's living in a very rural area or a very poor part of town where there's not, where maybe she's not, I mean, when you're dealing with people that just don't have that capability of just reaching out to available things, it's hard, especially in a rural area. Like if she's like out in farmland and, there's not, her neighbor's 5 miles away.
Right.
So there's all those different things that you have to take into consideration.
That's
Or
where the
even
church
friends,
comes in.
or even friends and family aren't close by.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, I know people who drive tons of, even to get to church, an hour drive,
Yeah. Yeah, from Berkeley to here, what? Or up there. Great
There's
township.
two thoughts that I had. One is that sometimes I would like to go grocery shopping and get away from everybody.
Yeah, a little
Yeah.
sad.
But, and now the other one just went out of my brain when I said that. Yeah, I remember now. Arranging some type of recreation for the children.
Yeah,
Yes,
that's-
absolutely.
That's an important,
Right.
Some kind of activity where they're like, even like if it's boys batting balls or something.
or someone even
Something to
taking them
release.
to the pool, to,
Yeah.
somebody to help. So there's different,
That's really important. I was mentoring a boy from a kids camp, and there was a single mom. She adopted 2 boys, and she relied on people coming in to mentor and take the kids someplace, so that she could. Well, it helps the children for one, but it also helps her as well, because it gives her some space. And it was, I know that would have been beneficial for her as well.
right, because you can't, I mean, if you're doing your own things and then trying to provide for their free time, their recreation, and there might be a need for help with schooling, tutoring or that type of thing, trying, because when you have little kids, some people know when you have little kids and you have to change diapers, it's kind of hard to go over the ABCs with the older
The
one, right?
5-year-old.
Okay, let's go on. So the first question was, describe the type of grief you may encounter in this case, and the case 5 responses. This is a case where I would expect a traumatic grief reaction. Okay, you have multiple sudden tragic deaths, which is too much to handle, as well as having to confront the fact of caring for these children when you're least capable of doing so. Another thing that in previous sessions we've talked about is usually you deal with the most recent event first
Right.
and work backwards, unless there's, okay?
That makes
Oh,
sense.
We talked about too, if there's a crisis intervention situation, first of all, you have to, whatever the event is, stop the bleeding. If there's a fire, find housing, that type of thing, and then deal with the other issues. So obviously, this is going to awaken different wounds from the past, but the first thing we're dealing with is is this family facing now? Okay. Number 2, identify the various losses that have occurred. We've got a big list here. Is a list of some secondary losses of relationship and support this woman may be experiencing. If the losses represented by this list sound overwhelming, they are for most people. So we talked about a friend, a provider, handyman, cook, lover, bill payer, right? Sometimes you don't always do all the financial things together. A gardener, a laundry person, a companion, a confidant. So not even having somebody that you can talk to about stuff. A sports partner, a mentor, a balancer, so that meaning balance out the life situation, so you're weighing things, kind of someone that equalizes you when you want to freak out. A prayer partner if she's a Christian, a mechanic, source of inspiration, insight, identity. We didn't really talk about identity. A lot of people losing that. I'm not Joe's wife anymore. I am now just Susie. And so then there's also some family or couple situations that you could possibly lose, because if you have friends that are couples, a lot of times as a single person,
You don't fit in.
you don't fit in, you can't do the same things anymore.
True.
Teacher, an encourager, counselor, motivator, protector, business partner, organizer, errand person, tax preparer. Yeah, my husband would be really, if I don't know what he would do without me. Couples friends, couples classes, right? I mean, there's like in your church, or if you do a dance class, okay, so you know who's your partner, you know. In-law support, yes, because sometimes the relationship becomes with the spouse's family. It gets estranged. They're going through their own grief situations, and just seeing you could awaken some not so comfortable feelings. A feeling of safety. We didn't even think about that or talk about that. And then a financial adjustment and a social adjustment. Anything else you want to add to that list, or is that big enough?
That's a pretty big list.
That's a pretty good list.
That's a lot of stuff.
These are the same things that you experience in a divorce.
Yes.
That's what I was thinking.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because I'm going, yep, handyman, yep, no, this, in a divorce, it's like you grieve exactly like that. I
Right,
think.
the world wants to tell you that you're better off without your partner. Well, God knows.
Then when you start dating, you realize, well, maybe not.
Yeah.
You're like, oh boy, now you've got internet, now you've got dating apps, it's like not even old fashioned dating anymore, right?
Right, well, if you don't have, then there's other issues about not seeing them in an environment with friends and stuff, about what about this person, do I really want to be involved? Okay, number 3. Other than grief counseling, what else might you need to do in order to help her? All right. Our author says this mother could use a team of people to assist her in some of the following areas on a continuing basis. Okay.
Yeah.
So we've got some resources that we've accumulated from going through the different classes so that we could look in our county. And if you need resources, we can always draw from what's in my box, from what people have contributed over the different classes. And, that's what we're here for, right? We can share with one another and help one another where we can look for some of this help. Okay, so she could be using a team to help her with finances, bills, insurance, medical costs, funeral costs, sources of income, assessing family resources for support. Okay, and I'm not opposed to agencies, state agencies, right? But we know that nonprofits and religious organizations, I think, are, I don't want to say, not
Better
more
way to
personal.
go.
Well, they're not so restricted by protocols,
Yeah.
right? And what's correct and what's not correct. Of course, if the person isn't a Christian, they might not realize the difference between that spirit-led care and, when you're in the system, a lot of times things get to be just,
You're just part of the system.
you're just part of the
You're a number.
system. And even if your social worker or whatever is a compassionate person, there's only so much you can do, but you do sometimes get to be feeling like a number. And there is just so much that these employees can do. They just are really overwhelmed with the amount of cases that they have to handle. prioritizing what needs to be done now and what can wait, which that goes along with some of the trauma and shock symptoms. You don't know what you can deal with. You might be, well, what about my kid's college? Well, right now you just have to get them into elementary school, right? You know, but that can wait, but you do need to think about that, but it's not what you need to worry about right at that moment. Childcare support, legal issues. We didn't think about legal issues. So there are titles, property, wills.
If something was just in his name, not her name, or something like that.
Right, even though in
Go to
this,
probate, yeah.
yeah,
No will.
Probate, then that's that one.
Oh, yeah.
No will, or, you know, that's a.
right,
Oh, yeah.
which in this state, you know, usually half is automatically ascribed to the spouse. But in today's day and age, not having a legal marriage, you don't have any rights anymore.
Right.
If that person was not legally married, then that bank account is not yours. That car is not yours. What about a pension? What about, you know, there's a lot of different complications in today's day and age because we're not doing things God's way so much as we should be. Counseling support, which we did talk about that. So the earlier on in the situation, I think the more available and on the spot we need to be with people. Because everything is so sharp and imminent. It's just happened. Even we think 2 months is a lot of time, but today people think after 6 months you just get on with your life. It doesn't work like that. We know it doesn't work like that. In fact, I was reading in one of these books that I've been going over lately that one pastor, when there was a death in his church, would put that family's name on his calendar every 3 months for the next 2 years
Wow.
That's nice.
That's fantastic.
to
Because
contact.
usually it's about 3 months
Yeah.
and then everybody goes away.
Yeah.
Right. And we know it's not a matter of just moving on, and getting on with your life. It's dealing with it and plowing through it and walking through it. Okay. Number 4, describe the possible trauma symptoms. The death of a spouse is difficult enough, but multiple violent, tragic deaths devastate. Here is some of the possible characteristics of her trauma, and this is the benefit of having a licensed counselor help us out with some of this. Her body could be adversely affected by some of these reactions: chills, thirst, fatigue, nausea, fainting, twitches, vomiting, dizziness, weakness, chest pain, headaches, elevated blood pressure, rapid heart rate, muscle tremors, shock symptoms, grinding of teeth, visual difficulties. And that isn't visual difficulties, your brain just doesn't process and you actually physically see clearly. Profuse sweating and difficulty breathing. Her cognitive ability may be impacted, showing some of these reactions, which we've talked about in other sessions a little bit: confusion, nightmares, uncertainty, hypervigilance. Okay, I don't know if we talked about hypervigilance before, but the amount of time that you're in that hypervigilant state is also the amount of time it takes to de-escalate, and everything is, all that adrenaline is, you're just on in that emergency situation. Distrust, intrusive mental images, which is something I would have imagined. Blaming others, we didn't even talk about that. With the truck accident, or with, well, if that person hadn't been like this, my husband wouldn't have been so overwhelmed and felt like he couldn't face things anymore.
Or blaming yourself.
Yeah.
Or blaming herself, or him for his selfishness.
Yes.
Or her kids, blaming your kids, or his kids.
And blaming
Or the
others.
kids blaming mom
Kids
because
blaming-
dad killed him.
Yeah. Yeah.
Poor problem solving ability, which is, I mean, sometimes you can't even decide whether it's, should I get dinner started or should I throw a load of clothes in? Right? It's the time for the kids' bath. Because at 7, as the oldest, even bath time, they're not really great about that, right? You just put them into soak and come back and get them in a certain amount of time, right? Keep the bathroom door open.
You're good to go.
Poor abstract thinking,
Immediately.
poor attention and decisions, poor concentration, memory, disorientation of time. Okay, so, I thought this was, school starts at 8 o'clock and it's 8:10. I was thinking it, disorientation of time, place, or person, difficulty identifying objects or people, heightened or lowered stress alertness, increased or decreased awareness of surroundings. Her emotional responses, so there's quite a few responses here that it's good to kind of keep in the back of our mind, just as we're dealing with in life with ourselves and other people. Her emotional responses are probably immobilized or characterized by fear, guilt, grief, panic, denial, anxiety, agitation, irritability, depression, intense anger, apprehension. Like sometimes you wake up and it's like this looming doom that's on your day. It's like, I'm just expecting the sky to fall. Emotional shock, emotional outbursts, feeling overwhelmed, loss of emotional control, inappropriate emotional response. So people really feel uncomfortable when we get emotional. If there's excessive crying or just expression of, even if you're, unexplainably like hysterical, happy, laughing, it's like, what's wrong with her? The trauma might be seen in her behavior. We talked about withdrawal, antisocial acts, inability to rest. Okay, and that's a very important thing to recovery, is being able to sleep and have our mind at rest. Intensified pacing. I find that sometimes when I've got a whole lot to do, I'm just like, I just start walking around. It's like, where do I start? Just start walking around.
Yeah, right.
Erratic movements, change in social activity. You might want to do more things. You might want to do less of your normal activities. Change in speech patterns, loss or increase of appetite, hyper alert to environment. So you're more aware of what's going on. Sometimes, if you get robbed in your car from a parking lot, you're like looking. When you're going to go to your car in the parking lot, you're like always aware, which you always need to be aware of who's in the parking lot, right? And but you just like always like looking suspiciously.
I still do that.
Well, you should, yeah.
We should always be
No,
aware of our
Me too.
situation and careful.
Awareness,
I don't.
Yeah.
not paranoia.
Right, right.
So there's a big difference.
I always get the exits, direction high, direction up.
Right, which
I mean,
we
that's what
we
I still
see.
do. I look at the door, watch the door.
Military people do not sit with their back to the door.
Yes.
I mean, yes, you're right.
Things like that.
Well, something just I kind of wanted to note too is like even the physiological effects or cognitive, like these are not things that are just going to go away. Like even the
Right.
biological
No.
ones, they aren't just going to go away overnight. I think, even like elevated blood pressure, rapid heart rate, these are things that can actually be for a long time. You think, if you've been to the kids camp that this church does, you see these kids who have experienced this, and it's been years since they were taken out of these situations, and they still react in a lot of these different ways, whether it's cognitive, body, things like that. And I don't know if it presents the same way in children or in adults, but ADHD actually has the same like symptoms of trauma in a child. So you think what you would think of ADHD, and it's actually the same exact things that they take and they diagnose you for trauma. So like just thinking about how they act, right? And so especially thinking about the one kid who saw, obviously
Right.
the other children as well will be experiencing these same effects, but that child who had that same experience, and it doesn't say if this was the child that had lost two
His other
others as well, so just kind of taking that into account as well. These are things, and even how like Kathy was saying, like years and years later, this is her experience, you know?
Yeah.
So, this is definitely not a short-term situation.
Okay, so the last couple on the trauma symptoms, increased alcohol consumption or other substances, right, to kind of hide out there. Change in usual patterns of communication. You may have called or visited your grandma on a regular basis, but you don't have that ability anymore. The presence of any of these symptoms may indicate the need for medical attention. So it's probably a good idea to recommend just going to the doctor, having everybody checked out, you know. Okay. What resources would you recommend for her and how should they be used? Okay, so we know that there's different systems in our counties where we can check out resources to help them. Resources for this woman should include an ongoing support system such as Grief Share, MOPS, survivors of suicide, and personal counseling. Other resources include books. This author wrote a small pamphlet, Experiencing Grief. There's also, he recommends Finding Your Way After Suicide of Someone You Love, Reflections of a Grieving Spouse, It's Okay to Cry, and there's a DVD that I couldn't really find except for on his website of Tear Soup, but I did find a link on YouTube, which is probably more practical because not many people do. I mean, DVDs and CDs are less, right? More and more people are going online. So I'm going to pull up the YouTube link. I'm not going to play it, but so that it's on the screen for our recording. And then after the class, you guys can take a look at it. If you want me to email it to you, there's a number of different ones, but I picked one that was short and the reading was very succinct. Once again, it's important to remember those who may be forgotten grievers, such as extended family and in-laws, which as they're not thinking about it, but we are. We may not be a resource for them because we don't have a relationship, but we can help get them through the family that we are acquainted with and working with into a support system. A major concern in this case would be the 4 children. Did any of those children see the body? We know that one of them did. We think one of them did because they came home with the mom. What are their ages? The older child, the more aware he or she might be of the circumstances of this death, and the more traumatized he could be. Okay, so.
You know, speaking from a personal experience, the last thing I wanted to do was read a book.
Yeah.
Right.
I couldn't even concentrate. I was in such a numb state that it was just like, I had like my kids were just sort of guiding me when I had my loss. And it took actually coming back to church that got me through, and now I'm able to look back and I know that God is just taking care of me and took care of him. And so now when I see certain things like squirrels, I smile because I know it's like him saying, it's okay, I'm okay.
Right, we all have different.
So, yeah, reading, I would never, I couldn't, I don't know how many people could, especially after what she just went through.
Yeah, I was gonna say that too, because you're talking about, I mean, maybe eventually, right? I mean, you can always give them the resources and then in their time, you know? But I was thinking the same thing, like, it would have to be a super easy read, and even then,
Yeah.
you know, that's why I said before,
Maybe
like,
just a little
yeah, like a
card or
pamphlet,
something
yeah.
to tape, you know, you're okay.
Post-it notes of like those things. I mean, honestly,
Yeah,
'cause-
no, right, like that, and even, they might even be wanting to go to a support group, you know?
Yeah.
I don't know
Yeah,
about anybody, you know, about this
That's
right
right.
now.
Yeah, I think it would almost be easier, like the DVDs and stuff like that, 'cause that's easier, at least if you're not even if you're not really listening to it, you're kind of just,
You're
every once in a
great.
while, you
Yeah.
might,
Your spirit's picking you up. Your
Yeah.
heart's picking you up.
Okay, I need to, email this link. So I'm gonna take a couple seconds. I've got this screen up on for the people, for it to be recorded about the tier soup, and I'm gonna get this so Madeline can get in here. Yeah, so if you wanna take a couple seconds,
It's just
Do we have any, like, I mean, obviously, I prefer the Christian, but does anybody know of any services like that, like survivors of suicide in Michigan? Like,
well, I've got at the end, I've got the link for Grief Share, which I'll put up on the screen too, because it's a support group.
Do you know if
it's Christian?
I don't think so.
I don't,
Survivors of suicide?
Yeah, well, something like that.
They used to be out of the Macomb
reach
County
out
Crisis
to
Center.
Wherever that person lives.
Suicide.
Sorry,
I'm
I
sorry.
can't.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, go ahead.
No, I'm so
Is
sorry.
it a crisis of?
Yeah, but I don't know if the Macomb County Crisis Center is around anymore. But Macomb County Crisis Center, because I used to volunteer for them, but I don't know if the funding came in anymore, because I know they were saying they were struggling and they had to move. And then I don't know if they're still around because of funding.
Do they have?
But the survivors of suicide, it was in the crisis center.
Oh, okay.
That's where it was located.
And, police stations have all the numbers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean,
Police stations.
also, just take into account how, during this time, like if this
Right.
situation had happened now.
Oh, can you imagine COVID? What would they do?
right.
And how many suicides have happened? in COVID?
Yeah.
I would wonder, dang, like, what resources have been available,
Yeah.
Another idea I had was whatever area that person lived in, maybe the person, one of the support people, if they were Christians, could reach out to the church in their area and ask them for recommendations. Do you know of any places where this person could go, or could you maybe reach out to somebody in your church?
Yeah, I'm just thinking about like in terms of like us personally, and like most of us go here. I don't know, do we have service, like, I know Peggy councils and stuff like that, but like, we don't have.
They call and talk to.
Yeah, they call, if I were to call like Colleen Word Council, hey, you guys have this information.
But we do have some of the resources, I mean, internet and stuff, but, right,
I feel
there's
like
a lot of
trainings, we did get some of these things, but
I imagine she'd probably refer you to Peggy if you call Colleen.
yeah, but the thing is that Peggy's like a counselor, right? So she does that
But
portion
she
of
has
it.
resources.
She does, no, I know.
But
she
we
does.
have resources, that's what I'm saying, we
Yeah.
have resources that we have stored up. And that's one of the things that we were supposed to do when we did our certification courses, to develop some resources.
Right, and have it.
And so that's why it's kind of a good thing to practice looking up things, which is what we
Yeah.
did it in actual class.
Yeah.
And if we actually do get a certification course, as I mentioned last time, that people can stop in and do some of those classes as refreshers to kind of use as your continuing education classes, but also to try to help us,
Another list, compile another list.
right, because just like
Yeah.
walking through these different conversations is helpful, okay? Because if you just looked at those cases, that case by yourself, and you weren't hashing it out with some other people, you didn't have this man's experience, what was going on, what would you,
I call the police.
right? That's what's helpful to us to be here to actually see how somebody actually walked through some of these different situations. Okay? So let's go on to number 6. All right, case number 6. Okay, another, oh, well, life is bad.
I found
It can be.
You know, I mean,
Yeah.
when some, some of these people that walk around with these life is good shirts, well, it depends on what you've
No,
gone through.
there's
Is life
love.
really good? Well, God is good.
Yeah,
that's good.
Yeah.
That is
I think
good.
it's all about attitude though, too.
Right,
It's like, because it's like, I've been through some stuff. I mean, I've had a great life, great family life and stuff, but I've had trauma that happened,
right.
and I'm also a denial person, so I put up the rug. Put it down, and but then sometimes there's things in the future that will trigger. Do you know what I'm saying?
Right.
It's like,
And if you don't deal with
attitude,
those things,
attitude.
if you haven't dealt with those
It'll
things
pop up.
and confronted those things, and even if you have some of these different things that we've,
Still
you know,
don't go away.
if they don't go away, it's part of what God has allowed us to be,
Yes.
to go through, so that we should be developing character, but that like it says in Corinthians, that comfort with which He's comforted us, we can comfort others. I remember years and years ago, I knew a lady, and she had health problems, and her husband was from a wealthy Grosse Pointe family, and he was in the tip-top shape and whatever, and he had so little concern for her. He couldn't understand what the heck was, anything. He couldn't understand. He couldn't identify. And she had we're not looking for sympathy, but she had no support for him because she had these health things, and he was like, oh, get over it, So because we've suffered, I think, and with God, He's equipped us to empathize with people, right? He's equipped us He uses those things that we've gone through to help us be more effective for His kingdom.
Right.
I mean, each one of us can talk about some of the crummy things that have happened that shouldn't have happened, and
Yeah, we don't have a story.
We have a testimony.
right,
Right. That's the power of it.
right.
Yes.
And that's
Yes, you're
one of
right.
the things when we're dealing with people who don't have a relationship or don't have a strong relationship with the Lord, is they're saying, oh, yeah, this is what God did for me in this situation. And also the testimony of what our church family, what we can receive, the support we get from other Christians. And why one of the things I really encourage about coming together is because we should have a relationship. It may be a loose relationship. Some of you are more familiar with me than others, or some of the other people in our group. There's 12 or 15 people that are associated, and some of us are around a lot and some of us aren't, but we can call on one another, right?
Yeah, there's something about, gathering.
Yes.
Because we had a men's gathering, it was a weekend retreat here. And there was a guy that I didn't really know, and we were just talking, and I was sharing something that I had gone through with him that he needed to hear.
Right.
And and he told me, he said, I needed to hear that, And it's not that I hung around the guy or knew I was friends with him. We were together, we were just talking.
Right.
And through it, he got something that God
Spirit
did.
nudged him.
Yeah, but it was through gathering. It was
Right,
coming together. It was,
Right.
That was,
Just
important.
having somebody listen to us is so important,
Yeah.
so important. Okay, so case number 6. A woman in her 50s describes the time when she lost her child who was born 3 months prematurely. That baby lived only 12 days. She said, at least with this child, I know why she died. At that time, she had one small son. In a few years, she had another son and daughter. Years later, her 21-year-old son committed suicide. He was described as a compliant, happy, easygoing boy. Following her death, her husband came home one day sobbing, which continued for some time. He said that he had seen a vision of the Lord holding a child. More recently, the 25-year-old son, who had already served time in prison, was shot while running from a property where he was trying to steal some items. He was shot at least 12 times by the owner.
Wow.
The case is pending with the DA. The struggling mother is just now considering getting help. Yeah? Okay. She also struggles with what others have told her. Her mother and others have said that she's under a generational curse. She shared that she has lost who she is because of what her son did. I think she's talking about the,
suicide one.
well,
Or the other one.
yeah, the
Her son.
second son, what?
The
Yeah.
one small son, and then she had another son and
The one
daughter.
that was being shot 12 times.
Okay, yeah,
What are the neighbors?
it's not clear which
Or
one of these sons.
Yeah, we don't
Sons,
know which
maybe
sons.
plural, should have been plural.
I think, I'm assuming that it's the 25-year-old who is facing prison. Or no, that was
in prison.
was in prison but got
It is more
killed.
recent, right? It says more recently.
Right. Yeah, but when you've got, okay, we've got a number of stuff here. So she lost a baby.
She came across and said that right at the get-go.
A 21-year-old son took his own life.
She said, at least I know this is what he.
And then more recently, a 25-year-old son was shot running from and killed running from a property where he was stealing. Okay, so this case is pending with the DA. All right. Yeah, this is not your common everyday occurrence. But
When they threw the sentence in here, following his death, her husband came home one day suckling, which continued for some time. Said he'd seen a vision of the Lord holding the child.
Maybe that was her way of, this is their way of saying that that's how she coped with it?
Like, maybe
Just kind
the
of threw that in
peace.
there, you know,
Yeah.
just kind of thrown in there, and maybe that brought him some peace.
Yeah.
For that one. And then this other one, you know, she said she lost who she is because of what her son did.
What confuses me is the very first two sentences, and when she first starts about how the baby she delivered 3 months premature, and the baby for 12 days lived, and then, well, at least with this child, I know why she died. So
Right.
when did that happen? Was that after, it must have been after the one that committed suicide, maybe?
Well,
Well,
at
I don't
that time,
think
she
so.
had one small son. In a few years, she had another son and daughter.
She was in her 50s, so.
okay, so
And then
Um,
years later, so she was in her 70s.
yeah, there's a lot of stuff. So it says, describe what you would attempt to discover and accomplish in your initial session together. I'm thinking, first of all, she's got a question. She doesn't know why this is going on.
It doesn't say her 25-year-old son actually died, though.
The 25-year-old was shot 12 times running from the scene of a crime.
And it's
Yeah, but it
still,
doesn't say that he actually died from it.
no, he didn't die.
No.
No, he's up,
No.
he's up to the DA.
Case is
I don't know, he
pending.
got shot 12 times.
No. Yeah, he's alive.
Did she get
Still
shot?
alive.
Well, have been
The
shot.
case is
Pretty well,
pending.
he's had 12
If it's
times.
pending, that means he's alive, right?
He's still alive.
You're right. You're
Oh, no, it says he was shot at 12 times.
Oh, he was shot at.
Yeah,
oh, at least,
No, he
okay.
was shot at least 12 times. He wasn't shot-
At least 12 times.
He was shot at.
He was shot at.
He was
Least.
shot
At
at, oh, at
Oh,
least.
yeah,
12.
okay.
Yeah.
All right, so we all
Yeah.
misunderstood.
Yeah.
We all misunderstood each other.
Grammar, it's like your grammar is
If he was getting shot, he might got shot at all.
Me shooting the gun, I'm like,
There needed to be another ad in there. He was shot at least 12 times, but it's not.
I'm just saying though, I feel like that is still what he was trying to say because that property owner was a good shot then.
Yeah, I'm
To
telling
get
you.
him 12 times, I mean.
What did he have at 12 rounds in it? That he was able to
Well,
do?
I know that they say like, if you're gonna shoot, you unload the gun. But that's what they say on self-defense. So I'm assuming that's why.
Well, if it's justified, then 1 or 12, they're justified.
No, they say in self-defense that you're supposed to shoot before round because it shows that you're in shock. If not, it's intentional. It's a huge weird.
It's a legal legal
It's a
thing.
legal thing. It's a legal thing.
Yeah, I can understand that.
Because
Yeah.
it's supposed to be, if you're defending yourself, you're in fear of your life. You can't just defend yourself
just defend
anymore and
yourself with a
wound
gun.
somebody because you don't want to kill them. You have to
In fear of
be in
your
fear of
life.
your life in order to not get prosecuted for defending your property
Yeah.
these days,
That's
which
what-
makes a heck of a lot of sense to me, but there's a lot of legal things. Okay, so you guys are right. The 25-year-old son is not dead, and so.
We don't know.
Well,
The
no,
case is
the
pending.
case is pending with the
The
DA.
case is still pending.
If there would be no case,
Yeah.
Because he's,
Well, there could
right,
be a case,
he's the
right? There could
criminal.
still be a
There's-
but
case.
not with the district attorney.
Yeah.
Well, what again?
Well,
The
yeah,
state
because
would be,
it
the
could
state would
be
be prosecuting.
Murder.
Right.
Yeah,
Oh,
but
I
if
don't
he's
know.
dead,
Whatever.
All right, so we do have a question.
It's a question.
We'll probably find out,
find out.
we'll probably find out when we
Yeah.
read,
Yeah.
when we read.
This is third page.
No, that's not fair. No,
You know what
no,
I do. The end of the movie, end of the book.
we can't, see, because you've got all this is a very good situation because there's a lot of questions. We might not get complete information, and so we have to, and what are we gonna do? So we can consider if the 25-year-old is facing charges, if the 25-year-old was killed. But what I see is that she said, at least I know why the first child died.
That's what I said.
Yeah.
That's what I said.
oh,
No,
then
right.
there's a suicide child
Then,
too.
but she doesn't know why
Yeah.
Because he was happy-go-lucky.
Going and content.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
it's like, I don't understand it, right, the action with the
That's why I
crime.
think this happened after the
Right.
one that
So-
killed himself.
If the son was actually killed in the crime, then she might be applying that. But it seems that the thing right now is that fact that she said, at least I know why the baby died, but I don't know why.
This time, I know why this time.
Why my son committed suicide.
I would
That
think
was
it'd
what
be the
I would, yeah.
suicide, I would think so
Because
too,
if
because he
he's
was happy,
Yeah.
There would be
Right.
nothing to point to.
So,
like there were no warning signs.
I think the first question I would want to
Red
know is,
flag.
she shared that she's lost who she is because of what her son did.
which one is
Which
that?
one?
Right.
Which son?
So we're trying to, okay, this is,
I think it's a committed suicide.
But we don't know that.
but we'll
Well, the
find out.
person's saying, like, we have to do, what would we try to discover or whatever?
So-
We
so-
could do like a trauma intervention for this and find that out too.
Right. So what we do need to discover is which one of these is causing that intense reaction?
For her.
Is it because of the son taking his life and she doesn't understand that? Or is it losing, is it, there's that. She said, because I don't know why the one died, okay? So it's clarifying, one, if it's the 25-year-old son or the 21-year-old son, who is actually not living any longer. And then also the separate thing is, did I lose my identity because of my son that was, who took his life? Or am I losing is she losing her identity based on the son committing the crime? Okay, so
And
that's what,
apparently, if he was running from property, he was trying to steal some items from, he's 25, it probably wasn't the first time. So he probably either has a record, or he has been a
He's already been
troublesome
at number.
child.
He's already had a number.
had some stuff going on in his life.
Well, he's been in prison, so he definitely has a record. And that case
Oh, yeah, I
That case
forgot
with
that
him.
part.
may be still pending
Right.
the theft. Maybe that's what's pending, I don't know.
Wow.
I think another thing I would try to discover is, the support, like, so it mentioned the husband back here, and then now it hasn't. So I would kind of wonder, like, what, is the husband still in the picture? And then also, does she have, because there seems to be like a religious component, so is there, how is that aiding, benefiting or whatever for, is she still in that? Because those things, knowing if you have that support system still and that religious relationship like that, in and of itself, it makes a big difference. Like I always say, like, I don't know how people without God go through certain things. You know what I'm saying? So that, I think that I would want to know that, where kind of is she?
Well, I mean, it says here, that the father saw the vision of the Lord.
But that was
holding the
before
child.
though.
Before.
Following, this is years later, and this is more recently, so
Following.
between years later and more
Oh, did they
recently,
lose it? Oh.
where did he go? Because why is she? you know,
Well, I mean, obviously it affected her, whether it was a comfort or it was weird. So it's weird to her, you know, because you have also in this mix is the father, husband's reaction to the son taking his life. So you have that complicating whether she's comforted by it, whether it's adding more confusion to it, okay? My personal thing is when somebody is gets comforts from something, I'm not going to try to get all theological on them and steal their comfort, you know, and try to get reasonable with them. I'm trying to help them get through that, you know. One time, you know, somebody was grief-stricken about losing a pet, right? Well, I'm not going to tell them that, and they're imagining their dog or whatever in heaven. Well, I'm not going to try to get all theological about what the Bible says about pets and animals and all these other things. The person was, I mean, it's a loss, right? So I'm not going to try and correct their theology about something when it, at this particular time, maybe in later on down the road when somebody is recovered and stable, then you could talk to them about rational things. But when you're in trauma, when you're in crisis, you cannot deal with them about rational because they're not rational. You can't reason with somebody that's in crisis.
And you don't want to enable them either. You don't want to be an enabler.
Right.
You know, for sure.
Okay. So let's get back to this situation. I'm so glad I'm not facing this in my normal everyday life, but this is, if these situations help us get through normal, like easy stuff, that's pretty good, right?
Yes.
That makes everything else look pretty easy,
Right,
kind of
right.
covers. Okay, so we want to discover what is affecting her, and we want to clarify what happened to the 25-year-old. Okay. Describe the possible complications of this woman's grief. Okay, well, one of the things we discovered from last time, those that were participating in the last one, I think there was a murder case, that when there is a court case, you've got this thing extending for years.
Yeah.
So there's not ever any, until the actual end, you still have this continuing trauma.
No closure.
Right, it's not finished, so it's kind of a,
But she also says that she lost who she is, and it could be her relationship with Christ. And if she had a relationship with God, I mean, maybe that's part of lost who she is, what her faith was always telling her.
right, she could have lost her relation, her identity as a Christian. She could have lost that. When we lose somebody, we're no longer somebody's child when your mom dies, right? You're not that person's child. And depending on what our identity is wrapped up in, I think it can make a big difference. When we came back from Belgium in 2009, after the big crash when all these 40 and 50-year-old guys were losing their jobs, I could see a terrible devastation, right? Because these people that have been working solidly for 25 years no longer had that job, which was their identity. So, I mean, we can be identified as a teacher, we can be our identity can be all wrapped up in being somebody's mom, and when that nest, you got that, they leave for school and you're empty nest, then you're in crisis because I lived my life through my child, or it could be something so much as, I have a Camaro and I love racing around in this Camaro and I feel so young. Like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It depends on what you're all wrapped up in. Obviously, we want to say to these people, our identity, and for us, we need to identify as a child of God. That's where my identity has to be strong. Because when I know that I am a son or a daughter of God, you know, I can, anything else can fall away. You know, when I had cancer and lost all my hair, you know, well, yeah, it was kind of like, ooh, you know, and I had these snake eyes because I had no eyelashes, you know, it was like, oh, this is really, but who was I? I was a child of God. But I did, somebody said to me, oh, you know, it's just hair, it'll grow back, you know,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
so.
No compassion.
Well, it was just, and later they didn't realize that,
Yeah.
oh, you know, any loss, you know, any loss is a loss, you know, but, you know, it's not normal for normal women to walk around bald, you know, so it was a little insensitive, but yet that wasn't my
Well,
identity.
most people, that's one of the things that most people say is the most bothersome thing about going for treatment is the loss of hair.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. Yeah, because it changes how you look.
Yeah.
Everyone knows something's wrong.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
it's
right.
it's a continual, every time you walk by the mirror, it's a reminder that there's this thing that, you know, you're dealing
It goes
with.
to what, your identity.
Right, because, you know, in the Bible, it talks about, you know, women, long hair and stuff. I remember, Elise and I were at Macomb Mall, and I remember these teenagers like snickering. You know, I remember going to a restaurant for Mother's Day, and the people around me knew that I was being treated, right? It's not something you can't hide. So, I mean, nobody wants it being obvious, you know, like if you lose a limb, you know, it's like, oh, everybody can see what happened there, you know, even a soldier, you know, they lose a body part or something in you know, so we have, it's easy to say, it's easy for me to sit here and say, you know, we're supposed to identify with Christ, but the loss of who we are is important because we're lost. If we don't know who we are, how can we proceed? You know, so that's an important thing to deal with this woman's grief. This is a very complicated case, obviously. Any other things about the grief?
Well, I think that her mother and others have said she's under a generational curse, so that's a big thing. To me, that says she doesn't have a whole lot of family that's surrounding her with comfort or anything like that. They're like,
Okay, so there's this religiosity, right?
Yeah.
Whether you believe in generational curses, I personally, I mean, I'm just going to say this, throw this out there, because as a Christian and being redeemed from the curse of the law, those things should not apply to us anymore, but yet you have to deal with that, right? So, you know, but there's theology around her that she has, that's a complicated thing. Well, if she's under a generational curse, then there's nothing she can do about it, right? She's a victim and she can't bring herself out of the situation. But again, whoever said that she doesn't have any support, yeah, and this was a real person, you know, so
yeah.
it probably took years for this person to recover. Okay, so we've got a lot of complications of her grief. How would you discover her coping skills? Probing questions. We can go back to the life skills, the life coaching things, probing skills, right? How are we going to discover? What kind of questions or what kind of things are you going to say to find out what's going on?
You could just say, like, well, what do you do, you know, for your leisure time? What are things that you enjoy doing?
Okay, so describe your leisure activities.
Like,
How do you
and
relax?
How much you do, like, how much
Right.
do you do it?
Yeah. So, I mean, so you're trying to find out what kind of pastimes or leisure activities and how often you are able to participate in that.
What do you do when thoughts start coming through? How do you react? What's your reaction? What's the action that you take when you?
So tell me
Reaction.
about
Yeah.
how you deal with or how you react or when you get overwhelmed with your situation. Okay. Obviously we would ask about what type of people do you have that you can call that will listen to you? Do you have people you can call on to do some of these normal tasks? Do you have a church environment? She might not be, like we talked about, she might have walked away from the Lord when the one son took his life, right?
Yeah, I think you kind of need to know what their relationship is with her husband. Do they
Yeah.
communicate? You know, because sometimes maybe they both regress and they just shut her. you know,
Right, you kind of, I hate
withdraw.
to bring up, my life, but when my daughter died, okay, I determined that this wasn't going to be a thing that ended my marriage, because that does happen when you have
Good.
a recovering alcoholic, right? People are together for a certain amount of time, but when the spouse is back on his feet, so often the partner has had enough and they're gone, right? So what is the relationship? How did the husband and wife handle this together? Are they supporting one
Yeah.
another? Or I remember reading a book where, because the husband and wife were responding in, everybody responds their way. They grieve in a different way. One wanted, a demonstration, or the other was like, like it was the child was missing. There was never anybody. So they didn't want to have a funeral. They didn't want to deal with the fact. And, well, there is that. One wanted to just get the closure, but the other was not ready to.
Admit to that maybe the child is dead.
Right,
That kind of
and if you can't deal with it, then it's open, right? So there's that conflict there. So who is it that she can talk to? Who is it that she can talk to? And talk about, and that's a listening ear. You just need a listening ear so many times. So, any other ways to see how she has, she's able to cope?
Well, I mean, it sounds like she talks to people. I don't know if she's talking to the right people.
We might want to find out if she's got any prescription drugs.
Yeah.
Has she been to the doctor? How often are you having a little glass of wine? That type
Well,
of.
you probably would kind of first go with the Cindy part and go, well, what do you do when you have these thoughts? They say that. I think maybe.
Yeah. Oh,
You don't always know. I mean, it doesn't always, it might not.
But you would just randomly be like,
Well,
so-
no, we're
tell
just,
me.
we're just throwing these things out of what we need to consider, right?
Yeah, but do you know if there are people who actually just straight up be like, so, how many alcohol you drink? Just random, like the.
Usually I do.
Yeah, like.
Well, there are some people that you do just have to say, okay, I mean.
This is your first encounter. It's the initial session together. No. And the first question. In your initial session.
Well, I mean, when you start probing with the
Right.
coping skills, it might come out.
Right,
Right,
and if it
yeah.
comes out, totally.
Yeah.
But I mean,
Yeah.
But you definitely need to know, are they self-medicating
Yeah.
somehow? How do you do it?
Yeah.
right.
Do you have a gun in the house?
Yeah, they probably not wouldn't maybe they wouldn't admit it. Maybe you need to talk to the spouse. Maybe you gotta talk to both.
Right. And that's the other thing, that spouse needs some support too, but this is the one that's coming to them, right? Okay, describe the support system you would recommend for this family.
Well, at this point, how many are,
How many are still living?
yeah, so it looks like just the daughter. The daughter and maybe the son that got shot 12 times.
But he's in jail if he's alive.
Where did the daughter come in? Where did you see daughter?
It said
There's a daughter,
Yeah.
yeah, in the first
Daughter was
paragraph.
a dead one.
Oh,
The daughter was a dead
There's
one.
a second.
In a few years, she had another son and
Oh,
daughter.
another
Yeah.
son,
So
daughter.
there's a girl in there.
right,
So how's she coping with all this?
Right.
She's an adult woman now.
Right, they all seem to
Yeah, I'm
be,
so sorry, I missed that one.
at least,
So is she,
Yeah.
later
Close with
teens
their
or
adults,
adults, that's
right?
another discovery of coping skills. Are you close with your daughter?
right. You could describe your relationship with your daughter, with your husband or whatever. Do you have a church environment? Do you have somebody that you can talk to? Have you made an appointment with your doctor, which is, you know, we always want to, not that we want the doctor to prescribe medications, but we want them to take care of the physical.
Make sure the blood pressure's okay and that she's
Right.
So it sounds
Well,
like
she
there's
says-
only one child left.
She said her mother and others have said that she's under a generational curse. If the daughter is well and doing well, they really can't say that,
You
right?
could be saying this.
I
It
mean-
could be saying that's going to happen to the
Yeah,
daughter too.
seriously.
Well, the daughter's got to be in her 20s.
No, we're saying, yeah, they can saying, yeah, watch what's gonna happen to her now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know, but it's obvious that there's some,
There's
some
some
kind of
issues
things
there.
that, there's some
Works
issues.
at Wall Street.
Underlying
So-
issues.
They might want to find, some,
It could be the
Gorgeous.
daughter's not doing well. I mean, that's what I'm saying.
Or it could be she's not even home. She's like a
Well-
split, taken off. She's
yeah, we don't know, but
It's a crazy
the,
life she lives.
but
already.
that daughter has also lost
Her,
two brothers in
Brothers.
one way or another,
Yeah.
right? And her parents are
Right.
devastated.
Right.
Right, so I mean, it's obvious that the first one, I don't know if she was born yet. No, she wasn't born
no,
yet
she
when,
wasn't born yet.
when the baby died. Okay.
I don't think you can tell her that you're under a generational curse if the daughter's doing well. I mean, yeah, it could turn, but if the daughter's doing well, I would point to that and say, well, no, my daughter is, look at, she's well and she's doing well.
Mhm.
So it could be a generational curse.
But you can't rationalize with a person
Yeah.
in,
Drama.
right. And so this is just piling that stuff on top of her. It's like, okay, we know that whoever's saying that, they may be Christians, they may not, they might be in some cult, who never knows, but it's a, you know,
Is that like making an excuse for them that it's okay?
yeah, that there's nothing you can do about it, that
Right,
it's,
yeah.
it's not.
That's just
And it's a
what you're-
generational curse.
That's the
You're
hand
stuck with
you've
it.
been,
dealt
Deal with that.
in life.
Right, so that's not where you're gonna go, so,
It's supposed to be comforting.
Yeah.
It could be.
okay.
I don't think it was meant to be. I really don't.
Sure.
I have a feeling this grandmother, or this other person is not a really happy person.
Okay, let's go on to the responses so we can resolve some of this.
Yeah.
All right. The first question was, what would you attempt to discover and accomplish? Well, one of the things I forgot is developing some type of rapport, right? The thing that you are there for that person and you're not going to judge them, right? That
Right.
they can count on you. And we're going on to
The actual case study.
those responses, yeah.
Okay, okay.
Because we want that person to feel free to contact us, and we want to make ourselves as available as our schedule can, because this person is like,
See, they both did.
They must be, because you
They
expect so
are,
many
she already said
significant
that
losses.
two
okay.
brothers.
Or then it could be the loss of child in prison.
say that.
Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
if a child goes to prison, that's a significant loss too.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right,
Again.
maybe we have
They're
to
saying loss.
write the person and find out what is the details of it, because we're curious now. All right,
So what is the difference between prison and jail? Prison,
well,
big
Macomb
time.
County Jail is, you're being
Jail
held.
is just for a little bit at a time.
Right,
Probably
and
more
prison
like
is 20 years.
1 or 2 years.
Prison is more
It's like-
long-term.
That's where the
Right,
murderers and the
20,
bad,
25.
the real bad.
Well, I mean,
stuff
you
goes
do get held in the Macomb County Jail for
For a while.
Until the trial, before you get out on bail or whatever.
Right,
Okay.
or you get transferred to prison.
All right, let's go back to this. Let's
Okay.
pull this in, guys. I'm glad you're interested, but we need to, we don't want to speak until 5:30. Questions, responses the author might ask or make to help her tell her story. Okay, so one of the things we do want is her to be able to express herself. You've experienced so many significant losses. How have you handled these? I'm interested in hearing what you've been experiencing after the death of your son. If someone could help you now, what would you like them to do or say to you? That's a good one.
Yeah.
That's a good line. So this is like, I'm really thankful for helping us to have a vocabulary to help bring people along when they're just devastated.
Mhm.
This is a time to let her pour out her story of multiple losses and evaluate her coping ability and her support system, her emotional state, where she is in her grief. her questions, her faith, and so on. So by her talking, the author feels that you're going to get a lot of the answers, because you know what, a lot of times when we're asking too many questions,
Yeah.
it's overwhelming. So what we want to know, and you know, our body language can help. All right, let her give the details of what others have said about a generational curse. What is her understanding of what this means? Are these other individuals experts in this area or in the area of grief? Probably not. Okay, so that might help lessen that if you bring up that. Does this woman believe that she is under a curse? Help her to clarify what she believes as well as how to respond to such statements. What is her church and theological background? Okay. One of the main concerns is her loss of personal identity. She has lost who she is because of what her son did. And I think we mentioned that. To me, this seemed to be one of the most in my face facts about what her response was. Help her to identify all the losses she has incurred because of this tragedy. Providing a safe place to share her story and to normalize her feelings is one of the main goals at this time. Okay, so we didn't really talk about normalizing, which we usually do, okay? Describe the possible complications of this woman's grief. Once again, this is a complicated grief situation. Now we're going to get some answers here.
Over here.
All right, there is the death of not just one adult son, but two.
Oh,
Two
okay.
adult sons.
There you go. Okay, now we know.
He died, okay.
They both died violently.
They both
And
died
it
by-
is still a legal thing going.
Right, because there is a case pending. Who knows if the person that was defending his property is being charged? We don't know, but there is
Well,
some.
yeah, the state would.
Knew it.
Would be the
Knew
state.
both sons were dead. Okay.
I'm sorry, Madeline, what'd you say?
Oh no, I had put on the thing to raise my hand because that was my question. I thought both sons were dead, but I was hearing that only one son was dead. But I said he got shot 12 times. You mean he didn't die? Okay,
Well,
but
you don't have the paper in front of you. I'll send it to you on Monday when I send your certificate. What the question was the semantics of the wording, because it was said he was shot at 12 times. It didn't say he was shot 12 times.
Yeah.
And then it says in the description that the case is still pending with the DA, so we were confused as to what the actual details of the case were. But as we're reading the answers here, and you can see them on your screen now, we're getting the answers that we were kind of foggy about. So once again, this is a complicated grief situation. There is the death of not just one adult son, but two. So we know the 21-year-old took his life. The other one was killed. The 25-year-old was killed in participating in a robbery. They both died violently. The situation involves the legal authorities, which we've talked about, that even still, there's going to be an investigation. Even if the owner of the property is not prosecuted, the authorities are going to be digging up around in this couple's lives. So it's going to keep them from closing their grief and with ending. It's just going to be perpetuated. They're not going to have closure. She has negative support from family and others. Okay, I might find a new church if that was my church, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Possibly she's feeling isolated. Possibly.
Probably and definitely.
Probably she's feeling isolated with no support. So this is, as Christians, obviously we're going to indicate prayer support and spiritual support as well as moral support. So she's feeling isolated. So we need to assure her that she's not alone. So we want to make sure that we're available to her. Like, we may be busy, but if this person calls, even if it's during your dinner, she needs you, right?
And two, like I would, obviously everybody does things differently. So maybe she doesn't think this way, but I feel like if this had happened to me, I'd be like, what's wrong with me? You know, I couldn't tell that my child that committed suicide had issues. I got failed there, and then my other child was delinquent, and then got shot. Like, what's
Well,
wrong with me?
No, that's what it said. I think it says that. She says she lost
Her identity.
who she is.
That's what I'm saying. I'm wondering if that's kind of where she's
Where
going
she's
with
at.
it.
I thought
where
it
it's
was a
like,
good mom.
yeah, like I thought
Yeah.
that I was, you know,
You know-
this, I thought it was this, I thought it was that, and well, obviously not, because if I was, then.
One of the things that we do have to realize is that as Christian parents, even though we're never going to be perfect, right? But if we did everything perfectly, your child still has to receive God. Your child still has to make decisions to follow the Lord and to stay out of trouble.
Right, but you're thinking rationally. I'm just saying. if
Yeah,
you're not
right. At
thinking
this time,
I
as
mean,
we,
and even so, I feel like that would definitely be something that the enemy would throw.
probably
You know, where
because
I'm like.
what kind of mom am I? You know,
Yeah, like,
Yeah.
first of all, my
Everything is
first
jacked up.
baby died because was I not?
whatever.
Because God knew that I wasn't going to be a good mom, so this experienced
Oh.
child, you know, it's a possibility, right?
Yeah.
My other one, I thought he was happy, and no, he's not. He took his life. And this one, what did I do wrong? He's gone off the deep end, and now he's dead because of, you know. So this is,
Yeah, like what could I have done? What did
Yeah.
I do?
Then her sweet
So that could
mother
be
just
her-
goes ahead and rips her a new one.
Yeah, exactly.
okay.
It's horrible.
Question 3, how would you describe her coping skills? Beginning with the death of her 12-day-old baby years ago, ask what she did to work through the loss, okay? So why is we talked about doing the most recent one first. Why is he saying to investigate what she did in the past? Well, evidently, okay, since.
Well, this generational curse, maybe, because, I don't know, like.
Well, they didn't say back when, maybe looking back, but obviously, 20-some years ago, she had a baby died. How did you, what resources did you have? What did you grab hold of at that time? To find out if those things are still in place, all right? If she lost her faith in God, but when the baby died, she had faith in God, then he can point her to her faith in God. Who did she turn to when that baby died? You know, so that's what it's saying. Ask, what did she do to work through that loss? So that's
How did
saying,
she heal herself?
right, what happened before that, you know, it says, what type of support did she have? So it's knowing, okay, so she got through it somehow. She seems to have been standing on 2 feet, so that evidently she got through it somehow. Did she get through it somehow? Did she, you know, start drinking or whatever? So he wants to know what she did, and if that worked, then let's try working on that again. So what type of support did she have then?
Well, it also shows she has like positive or negative coping mechanisms.
Right, to see what she did before. What resources did she use to handle her losses? We've talked, you know, those are all kind of expanding the net of different areas, right? Did she go to counseling? Did she go to a grief support? What helped her most at that time? And what would help her now? Okay, so that's a good, well, they're all good questions, but that's a good question. So finding out what she did before to cope and get through things and how well it helped her, but what helped her most at that time? So that would be if she, you know, if it was faith, if it was prayer, if it was a support group, and what would help her now? Because now she's got all this other stuff piled on. What do you need now? Do you just need somebody to listen? Do you need somebody that's going to pray for you? So it's getting her input. Okay, so anything else you guys want to say about that before I go on to number 4? I don't want to do all the talking. That's what we're here for, to learn from each other. Organizations such as Compassionate Friends, Survivors of Suicide, and Grief Share would be beneficial. Identify other family members who would be supportive. Okay, so we're not going to, you know, when you're feeling bad, you're not going to call the mom because you know? You don't need that reminder. It could be that sometimes she's not gonna be shooting her mouth off about something that's not helpful, but I wouldn't risk it, right? So who can you call? Who is supportive? Do you have a clergyman? Family members who would be supportive, as well as friends. Obviously, she had friends then, I mean, that might have, you know, people you know that have gone through a loss that could walk with you and say, all right, we're not gonna say, I know how you feel, but I've been there and I know you just need a shoulder. I know you just need somebody there. I think that's in my times, just knowing somebody is with me, because they can't do anything to change the situation, but knowing that somebody's there is helps with that isolation, and she's feeling isolated too.
Don't churches, a lot of churches have prayer support groups as well.
Right. So, obviously calling for like prayer chains and prayer support. This mother will probably need assistance in handling the comments of those who talk about a generational curse. So we would probably want to, if we don't have some scriptures and theology, personal beliefs about that and how you deal with that, find somebody who does. And we're not just talking about, I'm not downing deliverance ministry, because that's obviously works in a lot of extreme cases, but we're not just saying go pray for deliverance, right? You know, we want somebody that's going to be reassuring and not make her feel helpless and hopeless, right? So we might want somebody that's a little bit, if we're not informed about that type of thing, look for somebody that has a positive thing, not just like, I can't help it, you know what, I'll tell you, my grandfather got abandoned by his father, I got abandoned by my father, so does that mean my kids or grandkids are gonna get abandoned by their fathers? You know? I'm not, you know, I'm, whatever, you know, it's not inevitable, that's what I'm saying. With God, what you are, when you're under the control of the enemy, we have been translated from the kingdom of darkness into the kingdom of light. So we have something there. So we need to find, if this is a case with somebody that you come across, somebody that is comfortable with dealing with this and not making it an emotional situation, because obviously this lady doesn't need any more emotion, you know, but who is going to be calm and matter of fact and have scripture for how she can respond to these people. And in trying, I don't think she can answer these people back, because there's more than one, you know, and when you're arguing with somebody, you're trying to defend yourself or trying to understand, talking to the people that thinks she is under a generational curse is not going to help her get through.
It just gets worse.
It's just going to get worse. So she just definitely, she may need assistance in learning how to do the following, how to deal with the comments, how to distance herself from them. And I found that too with certain types of families that are into drama. It's hard to distance yourself, but you got to.
Yeah.
How to write a letter to them stating her beliefs and requesting they do not bring up the subject again. Which, you know, that, I didn't think about that, but whether they believe it or not, if somebody tells me, you know, telling them that please do not bring this up to me at this time. I can't deal with that right now.
And you know, it's unfortunate, but some people will get offended by that letter. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Because they're trying to reach out,
Yeah.
and it's like, and then they may misread it, and now it's just another section of some sort of drama. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Like text messages.
Yeah.
Misunderstood, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's true.
But if
Yeah.
I'm talking to the person on the phone,
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
going to answer me back. This is how I feel. Please respect. I need to grieve.
Yeah.
I mean, that might help with the
Sometimes.
distancing part.
Yes.
Saying.
Sometimes, I know I have recommended to a friend or friends, when they were dealing with something that was traumatic, to write it out, write it as a letter to that person if it is directed to a person. And I said, whether you mail it to them or give it to them or not, you're getting it out of you and on paper. And if you need to, go burn it, tear it up, whatever.
Right.
And sometimes that can be very therapy. Like you guys do that at kids camp too.
Right.
So,
But in this particular instance, she needs something to reduce the added burden that these people are placing on her because she's already got
Front and center.
enough.
No, but I think Cindy was referring to the part that it said, one of the things to be looking at was, she would need assistance, how to deal with the comments. So the first part.
Okay,
That would
so
help.
for her to clarify her position on
Yeah.
how she feels, but
you can't, I mean, when there's somebody that has an opinion and you try to defend, they don't want to hear it. And all it does is make you more uncomfortable and give you more emotional stress and the whole thing, you know, unless they're in a receiving mode. So I don't know. I think I would, my thing would just say, just sort of distance yourself from those people until you're able to.
right. Now, some people might respect that you please just don't bring this up to me right now. I can't deal with that. So, obviously this person is going to need some support for a long time. And, you know, I mean, we've gotten a lot of insight in, because of some of these different situations, we can apply it to some of our less complicated people that we might deal with. Okay, so now we're gonna have Henry and Cindy come up. I guess one of you needs to come back this way. I'll get out of your way.
Where do you want to sit, Henry?
At the table.
Bring your
papers, bring your
You wanna bring your paper?
Already,
This is
I
my
don't think
chair.
they're gonna have more than that, they probably.
My chair. Okay.
Well,
thank you.
Yeah, if you know who Beth is, reach out to the church.
Should I get my
Get the
hanky
office
out?
number.
I have the office number, yeah, so I'll just.
I always have
reach
hanky.
out to that.
My,
because
an old
of course,
aunt
you know,
gave
I
me
always
like
have so much on my
200
plate,
hankies.
You know?
I have
Yeah,
all
so
these
it's
hankies
Monday,
and
if you leave
so
Sunday,
my
you come
kids,
back
my
Friday.
grandkids call
Or
me
you
a
have to come back
hanky.
with the
You know what I
kids.
mean?
We come back on the bus.
Do you want me to sit back there?
I don't want to do that.
Right next to me.
Like you did the other
11.
time. I'm sorry, I can move aside.
10 years.
I'll
I've
just
been
reach
here
out
10
my
years.
mouth.
Out for the coffee.
I missed
Because I had to
years.
sit closer so I can do the screen, so I can get the, what do you call it, up to the people?
Yeah, well, then that'd be great. Yeah.
Okay.
So,
All right, can-
From the foster system.
Yeah.
But you can also just.
Can you guys see Henry
Yeah, okay.
and,
Okay, well, thank you.
Henry and Cindy on the screen?
Not yet.
Oh, now I can.
Now you can, okay. All right, so I'm gonna try and move up the transcript here for you.
Oh, we
so-
can just read it from there.
If you can see it.
I've got my glasses on.
Okay, so this is, again, an actual case discussion that the author of this book had with people. So we're, as I mentioned, seeing some people and hearing some actual people in front of you go over it is kind of helpful to learning. So I will just, let me get that. So I can pull it down. Okay, all right, so is everybody ready?
Yep.
Okay, go ahead, Pam.
I came in because I've really been struggling depression for the last couple of months. I feel like I've made some mistakes when my loved one died. I just really knew he was getting sicker and sicker, and I felt like I should do something about it. At the time, I just kept thinking he needs rest and his body needs to recoup. If I had taken him in earlier, he might still be with me. I don't know quite how to get rid of the guilt I've been feeling. I keep blaming myself for his death.
Oops.
So what I remember from your story, you said you waited about 5 or 6 hours and then called 911 for an ambulance.
Yes.
Jim had been sick for a long time. He said about 15 years with cancer.
That was part of the struggle.
And it had been gone elsewhere all through the body.
You just miss yes. That's all.
Yeah.
That was part of the struggle.
But your sense is that you could have prevented his death.
At least at that time, he might have lasted longer if I'd done something sooner to help him.
Did you discuss this with his doctor?
I did, and he tried to reassure me there was nothing more I could do. For some reason, I keep thinking it's my fault. I'm having a hard time with that.
If you go back and recall that conversation with the doctor, what did he say?
He said that the cancer was widespread and it was eating away pretty much all of Jim's body at that time. It would have happened sooner or later. They really couldn't save his life long term because the cancer was so widespread.
Did they say anything about Jim dying at this point? That there was nothing that they could do? Have they done either?
They said they could have probably put him on a machine. He would have been on life support. It would have prolonged the actual heart stopping.
So you wouldn't have wanted him to keep alive without really living?
Yes and no.
A mixture.
Part of me would have wanted him to still be here. The other part of me realized he was already gone and he would have been living without really being here.
So there's a sort of conflict inside of you. What are some of the statements you made to yourself because of this?
Well, typically I'm pretty harsh with myself, like I should have called earlier. I should have seen that the symptoms were getting worse. I think it may be coupled with being a caretaker for so long.
You were a caretaker for many years, weren't you?
Yes, and that's why I'm so hard on myself. I was used to doing that.
So there is a big loss here. There's nobody to take care of now. You're dealing with that as well. You know, I just wonder if Jim were here right now and we'd ask him, how was the care you received from him? I wonder what he would say.
I don't know. He was a very gracious person. When I would do something for him, he always thanked me. He never took it for granted.
So, so you're tired, that part of it.
No, you missed it. You missed
So
it.
you're tired, that part of it, and what?
I think it's
Too many pages.
Oh, okay.
There we go.
Fire it out.
Yeah, it's volunteer help. We're pretty easy on volunteers.
He was appreciative.
He did appreciate it.
Could that have been because your care was really good?
Maybe. I think inside there were times when it was hard to do, and sometimes I resented it, but I tried never to show that.
You pushed beyond the resentment to continue.
I felt that I needed to do that even though I didn't always want to be in that role.
That's really a normal experience for a caretaker to go through. It's a blend of, I want to help, but damn it, I wish I didn't have to.
It doesn't look like it does.
Oh, darn it.
It does look like it came out really easy.
It's chaplain's class, and we're gonna throw a swear word in there.
Look at it.
Let's see if he bites on that.
They do type out.
No more volunteers for me.
You're fired.
Fire.
Oh my gosh.
All right, keep going.
Back to the counselor. That's a really normal experience for a caretaker to go through. It's a blend of what I want to help, but darn it, I wish we didn't have to be in this situation. That's for both him and for you. What I'm hearing, Pam, is that it's a little difficult for you to give yourself the benefit of the doubt. You tend to be a little hard on yourself, maybe because you were a caregiver so long, because you were in that role, maybe you could have stopped him from dying. It's a reflection on your ability as a caregiver, but in reality, you are a wonderful caregiver.
I guess I don't always have the power over life and death that I wish I had.
We sure don't. No, we really don't. You know, guilt is normal. We all wish we could have done more, even though we did everything possible. I'm wondering what would happen if you took some time and wrote all these things you did for him so that you could see it.
I could do that. Yes, that's tangible.
It is tangible, and I think it would register more. You could also write out, I don't have the power over life and death. You're looking at all the things you could have done rather than what you have done. Would that be correct?
Yes.
So you tried the part of it and you experienced the results, which is probably feeding your guilt. Perhaps if you swing to the other side of it, you would see something different.
I think that would probably help. I could work on it. Just talking back to myself doesn't help.
Well, I'm wondering what if you did talk back to your guilt, you would say, what would you say to it?
I would probably tell it that it's been here too long, that it's robbing me of joy and memories of the good times we did have.
How would you like to say goodbye to guilt?
Probably write a letter. Probably write a letter.
Tell it to get lost because it's an unwelcome, uninvited tenant in your mind.
I know my husband wouldn't want me to feel guilty forever.
You use the word forever.
Yes, because it feels like I feel this way forever.
I'm wondering if Jim would want you to feel guilty at all. I can't imagine him standing here saying, thank you. You did a wonderful job. It's time for guilt to go. Can you envision that?
Yes, I think I could.
Why don't you give me a call next week and tell me what it's been like and where we can go from here.
Okay.
So you got my number, right?
Wow.
Just want to say, we're not always going to be dealing with people that are Christian vocabulary.
Yeah.
Okay, so this case involved a multitude of emotions, guilt, depression, and grief. If you guys want to sit down, you can. If you want to stay up here, it's fine. To counter Pam's self-blame, it was important to look at the facts about her husband's cancer and what his doctor said. Pam lost not only her loved one, but her caretaking role and responsibility, as well as her image of herself as a good caretaker. I tried to normalize some of the conflicting thoughts and feelings. There are times when it's helpful for the griever to actually talk back to him or herself, as well as to his feelings or her feelings. If some of Pam's thinking processes were changed, some of her feelings would change. Okay, so is there any comments anybody has about this this session that the counselor had with Pam? add to it? Would you take away something? What?
I really like how we had her like list all the things that she did do.
Mhm.
Because I think there's a lot of questions of, well, if I had done this, but I think that that's a big component in helping deal with
Do you
that.
want?
Unless you want to.
Yeah, facing that, the good things that she did, is very good.
You know, you can't tell somebody not to feel guilty. It's not gonna do anything.
No.
Right?
Right.
Because that's a logical thing, right? I mean, if she had called the ambulance a little earlier, all right, it might have done something for a few more hours, right? And there's always something more that we can do. So I think it was very beneficial to make a list of some of the things that she did do. And one of the things too, we have to, not only did she lose her husband, again, we have that identity at 15 years as a caregiver.
Yeah.
So having been a caregiver for 6 months, you know, that was like, took all my time, right? So just, you guys are probably thinking this poor woman. Wow. I think this poor woman
I think we've all,
done different
as
things.
you could see, it just brought some stuff up for me.
Which is a good thing. It's a good thing to deal with that and see also, you know, as a Christian, to reframe the past, right?
Yeah.
So we can't reason away guilt. You know, there's survivor guilt. Why am I alive and that person didn't make it, or, you know.
You know, I truly feel like her prolonging calling 911 was, she wanted to have that last time with him.
Well, you also don't know, I mean, you're also thinking, you know, after all this time, this is not it.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I mean,
Thinking that.
How are we even as a medical person, you can't predict when when a disease is going to take its course,
Yeah.
right? I mean, so many people, they say you have 6 months and they live for years. And some people, they don't give you a prognosis and something takes them quickly. And, you know, if it's not cancer, I mean, the fact of the matter is that was wearing away at both of them for 15 years, you know. So addressing the guilt is important because it's not that feeling isn't going to go away. But the fact that you say, you know, I've had enough of this, it's time for you to go. And then making a list of this is what, and I think one of the things that was a good thing is that her husband was appreciative. Not always, not always when we help somebody are they so gracious and easy to get along with. You know, if sometimes your personality changes when you're ill, and you don't even know that you're being vicious, or you're just, and when you're feeling crummy, you know.
Sometimes they can bring the worst out in you.
When you're being crummy, when you're feeling crummy, it's hard to be appreciative of good days. I mean, oh yeah, so the sun's shining today, big deal. How many days do I have? You know, I mean, you just look at, it's so easy to feel glum and gloomy about things. It doesn't say anything about God in this particular person, so I would imagine that Pam didn't have any type of faith. Often it's good to offer, can I pray for you? All right. One of the people in our group said to me one time something about, you know, as chaplains, you're not supposed to, you know, there's that separation of proselytizing. Well, in some set situations, if you're in agencies, there is a limitation on your Christian input if the person doesn't ask, all right? One lady that went through our course was some type of a counselor, social worker, at the 26-mile prison, and she couldn't bring things up to people about God because she was in a state institution, right? But as individuals, we are not restricted from witnessing. Being a chaplain, most of our stuff is backdoor ministry, right? It is back support and bringing people to an awareness of God, not directly, but it doesn't preclude that we do say stuff about God, you know, and give scriptures. You just have to be sensitive to the people that you're with. And, you know, so, you know, and if they say, you know, you don't want to hear it, well, you know, I'll be keeping you in my thoughts and prayers. I mean, even, you know, I have relatives that are, claim to be, well, one of their Facebook things was devout skeptics. So, you know, the atheist basically. So, you know, when I do my Facebook, I always put like post little things for birthdays and stuff, you know, I don't want to, I'm not trying to backpedal and not be a Christian because they know I'm a Christian. They know I was a missionary. But I'm not going to go do something that's going to offend them, you know, so. Right, you know, so it's kind of a, you know, some of the times we can be so forceful that we're shutting people off. So again, we always have to be prayerful and sensitive about the people we're dealing with, you know, but don't feel like, oh, because I'm not a licensed minister and this is, you know, I mean, that I have to just kind of hint at God that I can't be direct. Sometimes you can be very, very direct. Okay. So I'm just.
Sometimes we need to be.
Right.
And that's totally depending on the Holy Spirit discernment and guiding you.
Right. And sometimes there are times when you just have to say to people, well, this is what the Bible says when they're resistant too. So again, you have to be sensitive and prayerful. So I've given you this sheet. It's up on the screen for the people that are going to be seeing the video and stuff. It's from the Crisis and Trauma book as well as other places, but the normal crisis and sudden loss pattern. We mentioned it, I think Rebecca mentioned it last time, that it would be good to give people something like this to show what are the normal patterns of griefs, to help show them what is common. And it also to clarify to the people that it's not like you do one thing and you get a certain to a certain stage and you don't regress and go different, you know, it's not like you do one and it never happens again, okay? But it helps to understand that what they're going through is not isolated and particular only to them. It's things that other people have experienced and will experience if they haven't faced it. These are some of the things they might come across in the days, weeks, and months. They do have 4 different phases in it, and the author of our Crisis Trauma book and also this book, he suggests that he doesn't give them this on the first encounter, that he gives it and starts to talk to them and when they're starting to be like toward phase 2. Now, I guess you have to have it available when you're working with people and finding out. But like Cindy mentioned, like if you're just like first hit in the face with a loss, you're not ready to read something and you're not absorbing anything. So in our initial stages, I think some of the things we're giving is comfort and support and helping to direct them. But this is you know, very helpful to normalize. I think that's one of the things, even if, you know, I want to kill somebody and I have this feeling of rage, well, you don't know what's going on inside of that person. If I had that, I might feel that way too. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
We don't know. I mean, I've told people before, I have the capability inside of me to be a healer. Right? It's just, it just depends, you know? We have that potential if we don't yield to God. So, you know, this is up on our screen, and that's, just, it's in your handouts, and this is for you to make copies of. Don't give them your original, but you can make copies of it and pass it on to people as you're dealing with someone. And I think people appreciate, that understanding that what they're going through isn't just they're the only ones, you know, and what they can anticipate, you know, and not be blindsided. So, unless, I don't know if there's any kind of questions or comments about today's material. So I'm just scrolling up the different questions for the grief people. And I figured, well, you know, just get it together, the ones that can attend in a concentrated time. It builds on each other, and it's not so far apart that you can't remember something.
Right.
So,
right.
I think I guess that's it for today. So thank you all for your
Bye.
participation,
Hi,
and
Paul.